What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Danny and Bush coming at you today with our post-combine rookie rankings. We're going to go through Superflex tier by tier and break down, the risers and fallers of the combine, what's changed, and kind of the state of rookie drafts right now. As you guys are seeing this was Danny's 23rd birthday today.
23.
Happy birthday to the Ladster. You guys know what to do in the comment section down below, but figured we'd bring you guys something that would be a big-time talking point going into rookie drafts.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, 23rd birthday, March 9, 2000, as always. And you know how it is over here, like Corey kind of mentioned, kind of alluded to, right? If you're watching the video, just say a little happy birthday in the comments. Helps us a lot in that YouTube algorithm. But yeah, no, I'm ready to roll. In terms of premise of the video, like Corey said, ranking all these guys post-combine. Going to be a lot of risers, going to be a lot of fallers. Now that we kind of know athletically where exactly these guys might pin in from a pure draft capital standpoint projecting forward. So we're getting a lot more vision as to exactly what the NFL draft could look like.
Yeah, for sure. So without wasting any time, let's hit the intro. All right, so we're going to start right off with a bang because there was some changes, I would say, to the outlook of the top of rookie drafts. Bijan Robinson is still my 101. He's still your 101. I think he's still the consensus 101 for most people. But now we're starting to hear some chatter from, big name fantasy analysts, average players that, hey, in Superflex formats, the longevity of the quarterback position, we just saw what Anthony Richardson did at the combine. He's the true, if he hits, he could be a top 3, top 5 startup pick this time next year. What are your thoughts on the top of the draft? Do you still think it's Bijan and everybody else, or is it a little bit more of a closer discussion?
I do think from a pure market standpoint, if you have the 101, obviously you're going to do your due diligence. You're going to try to trade the pick, but I still think you need to take Bijan if you can't trade out of that pick. But I do think that these next two quarterbacks in particular, given their athletic ability for one guy and given the outer structure ability for the other, not to mention the assumed draft capital, are really close in terms of exactly where they may go in startups. I mean, we are expecting, Bijan Robinson to be top 12 pick, top 15 level pick, but these next two guys, I'm sure you'll bring up in a second, not too far behind in terms of exactly what we could see happening materialize in startups this offseason.
Yeah, exactly. I have Bijan Robinson right now ranked as my 13th player in Superflex drafts. Obviously, in one quarterback leagues, he'd be my 3rd player behind the top 2 LSU wide receivers. But Bryce Young is my 14th player. Like, he is literally one spot behind Bijan Robinson. I have him ahead of guys like CeeDee Lamb, Kyle Pitts, maybe not in a tight end premium league, but in a standard league, Dak Prescott, A.J. Brown, Jalen Waddle, that big tier of wide receivers there. I would take Bryce Young over all of those guys personally because I know he's going to get top 5, top 2 potentially draft capital. He's still the favorite to go first overall. And now that he's cleared the height and weight thresholds, I have no doubt in my mind that he's going to be a top 15, top 20 Superflex startup pick once the NFL draft is over. So I'm kind of getting the head of the curve right now if people don't currently value him that way. And to me, that makes, the 101 and 102, which is how I have those guys ranked, kind of in the same tier. And if you're going to move down from 101, I think getting the 102 in return is a huge priority for me, knowing, especially if you guys are moving down from the 101 because you're not ready to compete, that you can get a young quarterback to build around.
Anytime, especially like you said, when you're not ready to compete, you can move down from RB equity to quarterback equity and very valuable quarterback equity. Sign me the heck up. You kind of mentioned right now, I have Bijan Robinson as my 14th overall player. Even as an RB hater, he still has to be in your top 15 always because of how much he's really separated himself from the rest of the running back field in terms of value. You mentioned it with Bryce Young. He's my 15th overall player so literally back-to-back, 101 and 102, 14 and 15 in terms of overall startup value. But the other guy I do have in this tier, and I kind of alluded to him a little bit, Anthony Richardson is currently my 19th ranked player on my overall rankings list. And I get it. He is very volatile. He's not the type of passer right now that Bryce Young is. He's not the generational running back prospect that Bijan Robinson is. But what he is quite literally the most athletic quarterback the NFL has ever seen coming in. All the traits, all the tools you can imagine. All the buzz leaving Indy now is that this guy's basically a top 5 lock, potentially could go at number 1 now, given how much teams were impressed with that overall arsenal of tools. And it's tough ranking him in this tier, but when I keep looking back on it, I just think to myself, if there's one player in this entire draft class that this time next year could be a top 6 startup pick, could be a Justin Fields level riser. It's Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, and that's a tough thing because we know what the ceiling is. Like if he lives up to his billing, he's going to be like an 800, 900 yard rusher as a rookie, probably rush for like 10 rushing touchdowns or something like that. But at the same time, we compare him to Justin Fields. We'll compare him to Jalen Hurts. We compare him to like Cam Newton coming out. All those guys had more experience playing quarterback in college. All of those guys were better passers than Anthony Richardson. So, yeah, it's, easy to imagine a world where he's good for fantasy, but maybe not all that good for real life. But real life does still matter, right? If he's a complete dumpster fire his rookie season, maybe his second season is a little bit shaky in terms of job security, third season, whatever the case is, it's going to affect his fantasy value. So I don't think it's as simple as saying like, take the guy who has the highest ceiling, because I do think the floor and the volatility is very evident with a prospect like Trey Lance. His value be pretty volatile because, San Francisco has other quarterback options and because Trey Lance hasn't really played that much. If teams want to let Anthony Richardson sit like Trey Lance sat for his first season, that's going to affect his value. And yeah, he's going to be insulated to some degree because he's a high draft capital quarterback who's a mobile guy, but it does leave more questions than I think a guy like Bryce Young will give you, at least at the top of the draft. And that's why I think there's at least a tier break between those guys. So as much as I think, Anthony Richardson should be at least a top 3, top 4 overall, super flex rookie pick in your drafts this year, I'm not willing to take him over Bijan or Bryce Young because I just believe way more that those guys still have high ceilings and the floor is just extremely high.
Yeah, no, it's fair. Their ceilings are still absolutely high. It's just the way I look at it right now, especially with Bijan in particular, I could see a case where, Bryce Young's a first round startup pick this time next year because he's a quarterback, but Bijan in particular as well. What's his ceiling in terms of startup value? Maybe going in the top 10, like where he's going right now already. Like even if he was a Saquon Barkley rookie-esque type of season, is his ceiling even like top 8? Like I don't think it is. At least when I look at these quarterbacks, yeah, there's more volatility, especially for Anthony Richardson, but I'm looking to get that maximum ceiling. And yes, the volatility is absolutely there, but you kind of mentioned with Trey Lance, he's had about as bad of a start to his career as he could have for going 3rd overall, for getting the trade offer that San Francisco obviously paid to move up for him. And he's still going in most drafts as a top 36, a top 40 level super flex pick. So I do think at least you'll have a couple years, if you're not seeing those signs, to be able to maneuver him into a better package.
That's fair. I do think, for what it's worth, though, Trey Lance was a better prospect than Anthony Richardson. And the passing, profile that we had from him was a little bit better. And people might be quicker to give up on Anthony Richardson than they would on Trey Lance, because Trey Lance also plays for the San Francisco 49ers, which is a much better landing spot than any of the ones available, maybe sans the Detroit Lions, for Anthony Richardson, that he could actually go to. So AR-15 is going to be a huge conversation point, right? Like, it's going to make or break people's rookie drafts. People are going to be willing to take the plunge as high as, people are talking about him going as high as the 101 in Superflex rookie drafts. I would say 102 is probably the first point that we're going to see him start going. But other people are going to be scared off of him. Other people are going to trade out of that pick, let their league mates make that risk, make that decision. I would say for sure, if you can, just mitigate all that risk and go out and trade the 103 for Kyler Murray or for Deshaun Watson, I would just do that instead. But there's also a chance that you might have to be the one who makes that, takes that plunge and makes that risky pick of Anthony Richardson.
The beautiful thing about the rookie drafts this year, and I know there was a lot of talk, maybe this class isn't that good, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. I can tell you right now, if you are trying to trade up for an elite level franchise asset in Dynasty at the quarterback position, this is probably going to be the easiest you can do it in quite a while, because having, especially these top 4, we'll get into the next guy in a bit that I have in my own mini tier. You have a tier below as well. Any of these top 4 picks, plus maybe a small little piece, can get you maybe Fields, can get you Herbert, can get you Watson, can get you one of these guys, because people are going to have rookie fever. People are going to be thinking like, hey, I'm still getting an elite rookie prospect. And if I can, get a little plus on that, maybe that's the 201, maybe that's the 111 this year, they would be willing to take that plunge. And in this year in particular, if you can get elite quarterback equity out of this class that's already established, sign me up.
Yeah, exactly. And the guy that you're referring to is CJ Stroud, who I have shortly behind Anthony Richardson in terms of like startup value. He's still a top 30 startup pick, in my opinion. And I think people, underestimate what his actual ability to climb in terms of startup value is, because yeah, he's not going to have the high ceiling like Anthony Richardson. If you copy and pasted Geno Smith's exact season onto CJ Stroud this year as a rookie, he would be a first round startup pick still. Yeah. Even if he, only had like 200 rushing yards and like 2 rushing touchdowns, and he had like a 28 touchdown through the air and like 4,000 passing yard season. That's very possible. We're talking about a guy who's a very polished passing prospect, a guy who's still going to be only like 21, 22 years old when he takes his first NFL snaps. And there's a chance that he goes to, pretty good landing spots. If he goes to the Indianapolis Colts, and we've heard rumblings that they're just zeroed in on CJ Stroud as their quarterback, he'll have Michael Pittman to throw to. He has some playmakers that are athletic, like Pierce and, Jelani Woods, and Paris Campbell's still there and stuff. So he has at least pieces there if he goes to Indianapolis or one of these other teams, that I still think CJ Stroud should be a top 30 startup pick, and a guy that, really cements this top 4 overall rookie picks as the ones that you want. Like, these are the picks that are going to have more startup value than picks 5 to 8 and picks 9 to 12.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. Point. I actually have him in his own kind of mini tier at that 104. Simply because I view, Anthony Richardson, Bryce Young, Bijan Robinson as like top 20 guys. CJ Stroud's currently my number 26 overall player in Superflex. Reason being, just if I'm going to take a quarterback, the reason I prefer the other two is just simply due to the athletic upside, the out of structure ability that Bryce Young brings, and obviously the just overall mobility that Anthony Richardson can bring. But you mentioned it from a pure stability, pocket passing, ready to go type of standpoint. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if CJ Stroud is right going next to Dak Prescott next year, given their age difference, because that would be the type of player CJ Stroud can be if he does hit his ceiling in the NFL. Elite level processor, accurate all portions of the field, very, very good when he's able to get time in the pocket and deliver strikes down the field. There may not be a single quarterback in this class as accurate in that intermediate portion of the field, fitting into tight windows, than what CJ Stroud has showed.
CJ Stroud might legitimately be the most accurate quarterback to come out of the last couple of years, too. It might not just be this class. So he's definitely really interesting. People are probably going to let him slide a little bit and pass on him potentially for, position players like Jahmyr Gibbs or JSN or, whoever they like. Even Will Levis potentially could go ahead of him in some of your leagues. So these are, in our opinion, the top 4 guys, right? Like, these dudes are going high in startups. So if you're sitting there at the 106, you're praying that one of these dudes gets to you. One of these quarterbacks. Obviously, Bijan's not going to get to you, but one of those quarterbacks specifically would be ideal. And all it really takes is somebody in your league falling in love with Jahmyr Gibbs, or somebody in your league falling in love with Jackson Smith and Jigbo. And we can kind of move on to the next tier. Like I said, these guys, these are the rookie picks you want. If you have the 102 and the 104 in your rookie draft, you are happy as hell. And I'm in a position where I actually do possess both of those picks. And I already have Patrick Mahomes and Mac Jones as my top 2 quarterbacks. I'm going to add in Bryce Young as one of those. And then I'm probably going to dangle the Anthony Richardson carrot, either with that 102 or with the 104, depending on where people are valuing him on the market. So definitely, if you own a top 4 pick, you should be very, very happy right now. The combine just made those picks a lot more valuable. And the top 50 startup pick kind of tier that we have here, these guys are going to be more like round 4, round 5, potentially round 6 startup picks. And that is the top 3 position players not named Bijan Robinson, in my opinion: Jahmyr Gibbs, Jordan Addison, and Jackson Smith and Jigmo. Now, JSN had a great combine, right? He ran elite agility drills. He weighed in a little bit heavier, actually, and a little bit taller than we were kind of anticipating. Jahmyr Gibbs kind of did his thing. He was 5'11" or 5'9", 199, which definitely wasn't ideal, but he ran it in the 4.3s, and he looked great in the pass catching drills. Him and A-Chain both did receiver drills after the running back drills were over. So we know what we're getting with Gibbs. We know what we're getting with JSN. I still view Jordan Addison as a guy that belongs in this tier, despite weighing 173. We already knew he was small. Like, I'm not really going to double count. It's not like he's 165. Like, he came in 2 pounds less than what he was listed at, and he ran in the 4.4 still. Like, I don't know why we're overreacting and letting Jordan Addison fall to like the second round of mock drafts and pretending that he's not, still an elite prospect, an elite separator. So for me, this is this top like 3 position players, whatever order you want to have them in. If you think JSN's the 105, Jahmyr Gibbs is the 106, and Jordan Addison's 107, that's fine. For me, it's Gibbs, Addison, JSN, but in any order, you could kind of mix those guys.
Yeah, the discourse on Jordan Addison is very confusing, because we knew he wasn't going to be this height, weight, speed freak coming into the combine. We knew he wasn't going to be, Quentin Johnson, 210, running in the 4.41 range. Like, we knew that wasn't going to happen. But what he does provide you is what Devontae Smith provided a couple years, is that he's already got a great understanding of the position, very, very nuanced route runner, the premier separator in this entire draft class. And just because, he had a bad half of the stretch of the last season he spent at USC, people are going to knock him off their draft boards, despite the previous year and a half of being quite literally the most dominant wide receiver in college football.
Yeah, exactly. So he's definitely going to slide in rookie drafts. He's probably going to be this year's like Garrett Wilson, like where Garrett Wilson, because he went to the Jets too. I'm actually very much hoping that Jordan Addison goes to like a subpar landing spot. Like, If he goes to like the Patriots or the Texans or the Ravens or something like that, this dude's going to be available at like 109, 110 in rookie drafts. And I'm going to own so much of him the way that we did with Garrett Wilson last year when he went to the Jets. Everybody was like, oh, he's Zach Wilson's number 2 wide receiver.
Advance.
He's going to slide to 108 and 109. I got Garrett Wilson at 107 in one of my leagues. I heard some of you guys comment on our videos that he was available at like 110, 109. Pretty crazy. So Addison's still firmly in this tier despite, the shaky combine performance. I think once reception perception comes out, we see how good of a route runner this guy actually was. Once we see him potentially run his agility drills at USC's Pro Day as well, that'll probably help his RAS score. So I'm not really panicking on Jordan Addison quite yet. He's stocked down a little bit, but I don't think he's a guy that you need to necessarily panic on.
I wonder what I should trust more. The guy who made Kenny Pickett a top 20 pick in the NFL draft or a 4.49 time at 173 pounds? What are we doing, people?
Yeah, exactly. So the next kind of tier that we have here is kind of a mixed bag, right? Because this is where, in my opinion, the draft starts to slide off a little bit. So if you're sitting there at like 105, 106, 107, you're probably in a good spot because not only could one of the quarterbacks fall to you from the first tier, but you're probably going to get one of those solid position players. If you're sitting there at 108, 109 with a lot of your rookie picks, you're hoping and praying that Jordan Addison falls to you most likely. But also, you're probably not too excited about, Zach Charbonnet, Will Levis, and Quentin Johnston, who make up this next tier for me. I still think these guys are good prospects. For me, Zach Charbonnet graded out very similarly to Jahmyr Gibbs. The only difference with why I think he's a tier behind him right now is because I don't know where his draft capital is going to sit relative to Jahmyr Gibbs, who I think is like a top 50 pick no matter what. Will Levis, who's going to be a first-round quarterback, I have a lot of question marks just on field about Will Levis. I think he's going to go top 5, I think his floor is like 7 to Las Vegas. I think they would pick him if he was on the board. So for me, the high draft capital quarterback is definitely going to push his way up the board. The only problem with Will Levis is even though he's a high draft capital quarterback, people don't like him, right? So you can hold value because you're a high draft capital quarterback, but the dynasty community kind of has to like you as well for you to hold value. And we saw, with Kenny Pickett, even though he had like a solid finish to his rookie season, he didn't really go up in value all that much because the dynasty community didn't like him, as opposed to if we copy and pasted his exact rookie season under a prospect that we did like, then that prospect probably would have bulleted up draft boards. Like if Sam Howell had that rookie season, for example, that probably would have been a lot better. So Will Levis is a guy that, first round draft capital quarterback, if he slides, is definitely the type of player you want to, take a shot on if he's there at 108, 109, 110 in your rookie draft. But at the same time, he kind of has to be Justin Herbert, right? Like Justin Herbert was not a guy that people were overly excited about when he got drafted, but he just proved everybody wrong and he was able to ascend.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Will Levis, you have to have him here due to the quarterback equity and the chance that, listen, I'm not saying he can have a Justin Herbert level ascendance, but the dynasty community didn't like Justin Herbert either. He ended up being the absolute stud he is. I'm not saying Will Levis, again, is Justin Herbert, but he does have really nice tools. I mean, he's got good size. He's tough in the pocket. He's got some mobility. He's got an arm. So although we're not the biggest fans of him as a prospect, you still need to acknowledge the upside case here. No other player at this spot or lower nearly has the remote ceiling that Will Levis could be. Because if Will Levis absolutely smashes next year, he's going to be a top 2 round startup pick, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, exactly. But the issue is that I think people are underestimating the fact that he has to like really do it to convince people. Because again, we're playing a game that is dictated by a market and a market that already has decided that Will Levis isn't very good. So if Will Levis goes out there and has like a mad rookie season, exactly what, let's say, Kenny Pickett did this year, then people aren't going to be like overly excited about investing in Will Levis. He's probably going to have to go out there and really prove to people that we were too low on him and the NFL was right for drafting him in the top 7 or the top 9 overall picks or wherever he's going to end up going. So Will Levis is interesting. Definitely if you're there at the 108, 109, you have 3 quarterbacks already on your roster. You just like a couple pieces away. By all means, dangle the carrot to your league mates. See if they want to come up and get, the last quarterback that went in the first round from this draft class. People definitely do panic. I know in one of our leagues, somebody traded down from, what was it? The Mac Jones. They traded up for Mac Jones and passed on Kyle Pitts because they needed a quarterback.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned that. A couple years back in the 2020 draft, I remember I left that draft with Trey Lance, not Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Kyle Pitts, and one other stud. I think it was either like Devontae Smith or like Jamar Chase, something stupid. Like I absolutely smashed that draft. But I remember I got Kyle Pitts after somebody else traded the pick in front of me just to get Mac Jones. Like, I think Mac Jones went like 106 or 107. I got Kyle Pitts a pick later somehow.
Yeah, it's definitely, people will do that, man. People are thirsty for these quarterbacks. We're gonna just ignore the fact that I took Zach Wilson before that happened, but that league disbanded anyway because like people ended up leaving it. Quentin Johnston's the other guy that's kind of in this tier. So QJ, to me, I think he's a tier below the other two receivers. A lot of people probably think he's wide receiver 1 or, at least on par with those guys. That's fine. You could probably elevate him into that next year, and I wouldn't have too many problems with it. He's a freak athlete, but he has some question marks on film. So to me, I think he probably highest he should go in rookie drafts is like 107, 108. I wouldn't be willing to take him, up near Jahmyr Gibbs or JSN or Jordan Addison at that like 105, 106, 107 range. So for me, Quentin Johnston, highest that you could probably put him is like 108 area, but he's definitely a guy that is probably on the rise from the combine. I mean, the guy jumped like 40 inches. Once he actually runs at TCU's pro day, he's probably going to run the 4.4s, and that will at least cement the fact that he's going to be like a top 15, top 20 NFL draft pick.
Yeah, I mean, I still like QJ. Obviously, he's a lot more of a project than the other two, which is why I do have that slight tier. Still a guy that I have ranked as my 49th overall player. So although it says top 75, I also usually prop rookies up for the most part because I understand the long game that we play over here in Dynasty from a market value standpoint. But when it comes to Quentin Johnston, he's just simply not the product right now that the other two represent. And in terms of fantasy, in terms of PPR, like I get it from a real life ceiling perspective. He's probably got a higher ceiling than both of them, but I could pretty much lock in the next 3 years that Jordan Addison and JSN will have seasons over 130 targets. I can't say the same for Quentin Johnston.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think that, I think that's the popular sentiment to say that Quentin Johnston has a higher ceiling than JSN and Jordan Addison, but from a fantasy perspective, I don't agree with that. I think the prototype that those two guys are is much more of a higher hit rate, and guys that in PPR leagues like most of us play in are going to be more valuable. So even if QJ, like for example, I think DK Metcalf is a better real life wide receiver than Amon-Ra St. Brown, but Amon-Ra St. Brown has had better finishes than DK Metcalf. So for me, it's kind of like that conversation. If QJ turned into DK Metcalf, we would all say that's a massive hit. But if JSN turns into Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's more productive for fantasy.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree there. We also have Zach Charbonnet in here. He's the pretty clear running back 3 in this class. I'd be fine taking him, assuming he gets, top 60 level draft capital, which he's pretty much guaranteed to in this, relatively flat tier from RB3 to like RB7. I think he is the clear next guy after Gibbs and after Bijan Robinson. As long as he gets that draft capital, he lands, realistically anywhere in the second round that's going to be able to use him. I think he should be a lock top 10 pick.
Let me ask you this question right now. Quentin Johnston goes 12th overall to the Houston Texans. Zach Charbonnet goes in the 3rd round to the Arizona Cardinals. Who are you taking?
Quentin Johnston.
Okay, so I'm on the same page. We're doing this with the assumptions because Zach Charbonnet is a 2nd round running back, in my opinion. But if he goes in the 3rd round, that is a little bit of like a tier drop off in terms of like expected volume that he's, supposed to see as like a 3rd round running back versus 2nd round running back. So again, I'm doing this under the assumption that Zach Charbonnet will go in the 2nd round, which we don't know for sure because, we see 2-round mock drafts all the time. And Zach Charbonnet is only in there like, 20% of the time. But I think with this combine performance, he kind of solidified what his skill set is. He's an all around 3-down back that can do everything well. And he's a pretty good athlete, but not a great athlete. So definitely a guy that I'm still willing to take in the top, 6 rounds of a startup, assuming he gets the draft capital. This next tier, again, is more of like your other 1st round wide receivers, the best tight end in the class, and then my top, running backs that are not named, Bijan, Charbonnet, or Jahmyr Gibbs. Josh Downs, Zay Flowers, Jalen Hyatt. These guys are pretty much locked and loaded top 50 picks in the NFL draft. And I would be stunned if Jalen Hyatt and Zay Flowers are not 1st round picks as well. So those two guys are definitely going to fit into the back end of the 1st round type of area. Again, there's warts on their profile. Jalen Hyatt, only 1 year of production, late breakout age, all that stuff. Zay Flowers is a senior. He's undersized. Josh Downs, very undersized, came in at like 5'9", 171 pounds, but he's got an ironclad production profile. So there's warts with these players, which is why this like late 1st round area is not great. And then Michael Mayer really kind of closed the gap between him being the clear tight end 1 in this class versus Kincaid and, the rest of the tight ends that obviously showed out at the combine like Washington and Musgrave and company.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Going into the combine, there was like no doubt in my mind that Mayer would like by far be the first tight end off the board. Now you ask me, I wouldn't be shocked if it was Kincaid. I wouldn't be shocked if it was Darnell Washington. I wouldn't be shocked if either of the guys went before Michael Mayer. I wouldn't be shocked if Michael Mayer was the third tight end off the board in the draft, just because of what those guys were able to show. Washington in particular, I mean, 264 pounds running, 4.64. Like you look at his size, speed, overall measurables, and you compare it to a guy like Gronk, and there's not much of a difference there. Obviously, big difference in terms of the tier of prospect, but I mean, if he gets taken like 28th to the Bengals or 21st to the Chargers, like I wouldn't be shocked if I ended up having Darnell Washington as my tight end one going into fantasy.
Yeah, man, it's crazy because Washington literally ran like a 0.15 better short shuttle than like Kayshon Boutte, which is like the stupidest thing that is like that I've ever heard from the combine. To me, Michael Mayer is still the tight end one. I know
Agreed.
he didn't like test the greatest, like he ran like a 4.7 flat and he had like decent jumps, but he still has like one of the best production profiles you're ever going to see from a tight end prospect. We're talking like 30% target share type of tight end, early, freshman production, keeping a second round pick like Cole Kmet, like off the field. I think people are going to sleep on Michael Mayer quite a bit, and he's going to be available for people at, the 203, the 204, 205 potentially in leagues, and especially in tight end premium if he's there at that point in time. Like, I'm going to be snapping up so much Michael Mayer. It's not even funny because to me, I still think he belongs to be at the tail end of the first round.
Yeah, no, I don't mind that as well. I also want to make a quick brief mention to the fact that thing one and thing two, Josh Downs and Zay Flowers, like if you were to pick like two players at the same position that are as similar as you can in this draft. I mean, Flowers and Downs both are going to be, sub 5'10" baller slot wide receivers that can create after the catch for their team. So not much else to say there. I personally prefer Downs. You prefer Downs just because of the production analytical profile that he represents compared to Flowers. But at the same time, Flowers could go earlier in the NFL draft. So I do think both those guys, if you get either of them, I would prefer getting them in the early second. But even if, your draft comes and you take them 111 or 112, it's kind of how I felt about when I was taking like Jahan Dotson there last year, where I'm fine with taking them in the late first, but anytime they fell to the second, I was smashing the draft button.
Yeah, and the other two guys that I got in this tier are my current RB4 and 5, Chase Brown and Tank Bigsby. Again, I think Chase Brown solidified, at least in my opinion, that he should at least be a top 3 round pick in the NFL draft, given how he tested. He tested, like, we're not talking about a guy that tested well. We're talking about a guy that tested on par with Jerick McKinnon, who is, one of the freakier running backs in the league in terms of his athleticism. So this is a guy that I thought was like a borderline average athlete coming into the combine. And not only did he test better than I expected, he tested way better than I expected. So Chase Brown, to me, I think in the eyes of NFL teams, he's very productive this year. Of course, hometown, London, Ontario, we got to stand our Canadian lads here, but he should be a top 3 round NFL draft pick. And if he is, he's going to be a guy I'm willing to take at the 1-2 turn.
Yeah, big shout out there. Got the London Mustang colors on right now, supporting the boy Chase Brown. Big time player over there. But yeah, no, the only reason I have him in the following tier is just because there's a little bit more question marks with his draft capital versus the guy that I do have in the last spot of this tier. Devon Achane, I get it. He's a smaller back, 190 pounds. He ran 4.32, so clearly showed that elite speed that he showed on the field this past year. I just have a much better gauge on the NFL right now that this guy's going to be a second or third round pick, probably a second round pick. I think his floor is probably like 80th overall. Like I just don't really see a scenario for the most part where he falls out of the top 64. But if he does, he's not hearing his name called later than midway through the third round. And with that case, because I have that clarity and because we know day 2 capital at the running back position is very, very valuable, that's currently why I have that sub tier. But if it comes out and Devon Achane goes after Chase Brown in the NFL draft, then I have no problem making that switch.
Yeah, and same goes for Tank Bigsby, who I have in this tier again, just purely based on his film. I don't know if he's going to go in the third round. He could very well be a 5th round pick, and I wouldn't totally be shocked by that. If I had to like make a list right now, outside of Gibbs, Charbonnet, and Bijan Robinson, which running backs are likely, or at least most likely, if there was like betting odds to get day 2 draft capital, I would say Achane would be the betting favorite probably. And then Roshan Johnson and Tajay Spears would probably be right behind those two, just because they were at the Senior Bowl. They had good combines. Teams seem to really like them. We see them mock drafted in the, top 3 rounds of mocks a lot. Whereas, Kendre Miller, Chase Brown, Tank Bigsby, Sean Tucker, these names are kind of just coming onto the scene right now as the underclassmen are starting to get back into the swing of things. So Chase Brown, to me, is the guy that I really like in that tier. The final tier we can kind of just go over. These guys are basically just graded on talent for me right now. It's not really anything to do with their draft capital. Roshan Johnson, Kendre Miller, Sean Tucker, Dalton Kincaid. Again, if you were drafting before the rookie draft or before the NFL draft, I would say take Kincaid over these guys because we know Kincaid's probably gonna be a first round pick, and these other guys are probably gonna be like day 3 running backs. But I'm just grading on talent at this point in time, and same goes for Darnell Washington. And we're pretty much know for a fact he's at least give me a top 50 pick, if not a first round pick.
Yeah. And for me, I have the same names listed. Kayshon Boutte is obviously the biggest one. I'm assuming.
I dropped him right out, dude. I don't give a shit. He's giving me a day 3 pick. I have no doubt in my mind.
And if he's day 3, he's absolutely outside of the top 24. It's just, man, there you go from a guy that was supposed to show out at the combine, who talked a big game going into the combine, who compared himself to Stephon Diggs, who said he was going to run a 4.3 to, what did he run? One of his times like 4.55. The other time was like 4.67. He jumped like 29 inches. His broad was like barely over 10 feet or maybe even under 10 feet. I forget exactly what it was, but one of the all-time biggest flop performances of the NFL Combine. And with all the off-field stuff, like you said, he probably deserves a spot outside of these rankings. But for now, if he gets day 2 capital, he'll be here. But realistically, for me, he's most likely on the way out once we see what actually materializes. Because the more I think about it, there's probably no shot this guy goes in the first 3 rounds with that testing.
Yeah, well, not to mention he came in smaller than he was listed too. He's 5'11", 195 pounds. He was listed like 6'1", 205 on most sites for Kayshon Boutte. And same goes for Zach Evans too, who doesn't find himself in this area, at least for the time being, because he comes in 5'11", 202. And I'm seeing people do mental gymnastics on Twitter talking about like, oh, he played at 210. He slimmed down to run for the combine. And then he blew his hamstring out so he couldn't run. It's like, okay, well, is he 212 or did the site just lie? Like, to me, I think it's way more likely that the site just lied, because if you look across the board, all positions are usually inflated by 5 to 10 pounds or an inch or 2 of height. So to me, I don't think they made some special exception for Zach Evans and listed him at his actual size, and he actually slimmed down to run faster and just happened to suffer a hamstring injury.
Well, but I mean, Bijan was listed at like 6'1", 225, and he weighed in at 5'11", 215, which is, by the way, more than adequate size. But basically what I'm saying is it's not hyperbolic to think that these sites will skew, 1 to 3 inches in height and 10 to 15 pounds sometimes in terms of weight. Like, it happens way more than people think. So with Zach Evans, you mentioned 202 pounds, 5'11". Like, realistically, his size profile isn't even better.
It's like Jahmyr Gibbs' size.
I was going to say Jahmyr Gibbs has a better size profile. He's 5'9", 199.
Yeah, exactly, which is crazy because Evans, especially given his skill set, he runs like with a lot of physicality and stuff. And if he's going to be 202 pounds at 5'11" with like a 27 BMI, it's definitely not going to be ideal for him. So again, there was no real structure to this video. We kind of just talked through the rankings, decision points and, what changed after the NFL Combine. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, it's Danny's birthday today, so leave him a happy birthday down below in the comments. Hit the like button if you guys enjoyed while you're down there. Subscribe to the channel if this is the first time you're checking anything of ours out. If you want a more in-depth look on these prospects, tail of the tapes are coming fast and furious now that the NFL Combine has come and gone. Bijan Robinson's dropped yesterday if you want to go check that out. Bryce Young's will be out tomorrow if you want to stay tuned for that as well. Make sure to check out our sponsors if you want to support us, aura.com/fantasy stock exchange to get yourself the best cybersecurity known to man. We'll be announcing another new sponsor of ours on Dynasty Decisions in the coming days. So definitely stay tuned for that. And of course, check out Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code FSC for 100% back and get yourself some values in big board drafts right now, because a lot of these rookies are going way, way late, especially the running backs. And I think, a lot of these guys that are good bets for draft capital, like Roshan Johnson and, Tajay Spears and Chase Brown, are definitely good values right now. So definitely check all that stuff out. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.
Why you need the money?